There is a new series you have to see Wednesdays at 11 p.m. on BET. You can watch the six-part series, Disrupt and Dismantle. It is executive produced by the one and only Soledad O'Brien. Welcome to the show, Soledad O'Brien. How are
Hi
you?
there. I'm great. Thanks for having me.
I got to tell you, give me a minute here because I'm a big fan of your work. So I'm geeking out a little bit. So I'm just going to geek out for a second. I love your work.
More.
And I
Don't,
just
we could do that for the whole show. Go ahead. Just carry on.
You've had an influence on me. I'm really grateful that you're here. And I can only you've been grinding for a very long time, and you own your own company. But I just want to say, I can only imagine just how difficult it's been over the years. So thank you so much for paving the way for so many people. Just want to give you your props for a minute. I can imagine it's been a journey.
Thank you. That's a very kind thing to say. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you. So I love this. I'm looking forward to this. I mean, this tackles environmental racism, police brutality, the school to prison pipeline, all these issues. Why do you think it's so important right now, disrupt and dismantle?
I think it's an interesting time. I really think in the wake of the killing of George Floyd, there's a different conversation happening. And the question is, does this conversation continue, right? It's not conversations that just Black people are having about, hey, these are the problems. I think we're adding more voices, which is essential. And also people are saying it's not just individuals, like it's systems. These are about, systemic racism is about a system. It's actually very easy to point out individual, this person, he's a racist or she's doing this. But when it comes to systems, I think sometimes systems are overwhelming. They're just big and it's hard to figure out how to get your head around them. How do you change them? And so we were very interested in tackling a system, using an individual story, but talking about how we got here sort of through history, talking about the system, and then kind of giving people advice about how you think about tackling a big system.
What's been a moment in your career, Soledad, where you had to disrupt and dismantle?
I think anytime you have to say, this is not cool, this is not okay, is a moment of disrupting and dismantling. And I've had a couple of those. To this day, I try to, when it comes to journalists, certainly when I'm on social media, I like to elevate things that I think are great and people who I think are great and good stories. But I also like to say, I think this is kind of BS. Like, I don't think we should be putting liars on TV news shows. I think that's kind of like a very low bar. I don't think if someone is not an expert, I don't think they should be given a platform on a show to talk about things that require expertise. Again, I think that's a low bar. It often doesn't really win you friends. I think people sometimes get mad about being called out, partly because, again, I'm a fan of naming things because I think you have to. I think if you do a broad sweep of this is a problem, but not name specifically what it is and who's doing it and why, I think you lose some power from that. So I've tried to do that my whole career, not to necessarily be mean to people, but to call out systems that are flawed and to show other people that there are people who are rooting against those things gaining ground and that we should fight them and we should call them out. I just think it's basic. I mean, why the hell are you sorry, I'm a cursor. Why would you be a journalist? Like, why have a seat at a table, right? All the fighting and the work that you do to get a seat at the table. Why have a seat at the table if you're not going to use it to do something useful?
Let me ask you, because I was thinking about this recently. What do you think the turning point was? Because this was happening before Trump got into office. I can recall during the Obama and Clinton primary, I began to see this like versus culture, get on TV, have a hot debate. Do you have any idea what was the moment? It was the money.
It's just cheap. It's just cheap. So when you have two dueling congressmen, right, it's just inexpensive because you hire them, let's say for $100,000 or $150,000 a year. And then now they're your talking heads and you can cycle them through every single show. It's just inexpensive compared, when we go out into the field to shoot these stories, they're very expensive to report, costs a lot of money. So if you can figure out how to create drama, right? And drama, listen, anybody who's seen a Real Housewives show, right, knows we bring everybody in, we give them a lot to drink, and then we create a drama moment. Like, that's kind of what's happening. You create this dramatic moment that's not necessarily focused on educating your public informing the public and bringing them good information. I think debate is fine. I'm all for debate, but debate needs to be centered on facts. Debate is not just people yelling random talking points to each other that are not accurate and are not vetted.
And what it also allows, it allows for people who aren't experts, who can't talk policy, to get on TV and just talk really fast and really loud and hopefully have a viral clip. That's what it allows for. They're
Clearly,
not talking policy. So
absolutely. And
it
that's a really
opens the
great
door.
point, right? There's a whole second audience that comes,
Yes.
and which is one of the reasons I think it's a mistake to put people on the air who lie, right? Because they're coming on so that they can use the platform to lie. And also they're going to chop this into a little clip and put it on social media that shows them pushing back or them spouting their lie or whatever. And you've helped them create content basically using your platform. And so, yeah, it's ridiculous. And it's so basic to good journalism. It's just don't put liars on. So yeah, I get very frustrated about it, I gotta say.
Well, that's why Disrupt and Dismantle is so important. Again, airing Wednesdays at 11 p.m. on BET. I got to ask you this, though. I have to ask you this. What are your thoughts? This was a viral story yesterday. She is somebody who was on TV lying. She issued an apology yesterday. Stacey Dash, what are your thoughts on her coming out and apologizing for her quote was, "I was an angry conservative Black woman."
Yeah, listen, I think whatever makes you get peace with yourself is the most important. It sounds like that to me. Actually, I just flew in on a red eye back to New York, so I missed a lot of that. But but she's not the first, and she won't be the last. I always think it's weird when people refer to themselves in the third person, right? She says Stacey was an angry Black Stacey. Well, if I ever say to you Soledad, like that's odd. But listen, if she feels like she wants to do something else and relaunch her life in some other way, good for her. I'm all about people's opportunities to change and grow. I'm also fully understanding when you've hurt a lot of people or you've been used in order to further something that's very divisive and very dangerous. There might be a lot of people around you who are not particularly forgiving. So, I understand both sides of that. But if that's what's making her happy in this moment, good for her.
The other thing that I'm seeing as far as Black folks in media, Soledad, that I mean, Stacey was doing it earlier, but there was an influx of Black folks in media who are failed actors, failed reality stars, failed social media celebrities, and they're now on cable news only because they say they are a Black Trump supporter or they are a Black conservative. We've always had Black conservatives, right? But I think we could say that Condoleezza Rice was informed. Colin Powell was informed. These weren't like people who had another career that just failed. What do you think
It's a
about this?
gig. I think it's a gig, right?
Wow.
It is a gig. And I think it's a bit of a grift. It's a way, to make some money. And I think the downside of it is that you will get used to do that. And then you might find yourself in a position where you look back and say, yeah, that's not exactly who I was. But, I don't know. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. But again, it goes back to this idea when you're willing to put people who are not experts on TV and you just need them to say a thing, right? We just need you to say the crazy thing, the over the top thing, the contradictory thing. It's all part of this system of financially, it makes sense. It's just inexpensive.
Especially if you are a Black person upholding or defending racism. That's very profitable.
Yes, it's a well-paying grift. I got to tell you, that is for sure.
This, I remember when you did Black in America, and I love Reverend Jesse Jackson. I do. I love him to death, and I've interviewed him before. And you were candid that y'all had this conversation where there were some questions about you doing this special because I guess one of your parents are from Cuba, your mother's from Cuba, and there was this question about your identity, and you spoke about that so eloquently. Y'all can go on YouTube to look it up, like you've spoken about that. But I do want to know, what did you think when Kamala Harris was having her identity questioned from folks in our community saying, oh, she's not really Black enough? I'm just curious. And mind you, I think about Shirley Chisholm. Her parents weren't born in this country. I think about so many Black folks throughout history who live in this country and done some great work. But what did you think when you heard that narrative on now Vice President Kamala Harris?
Yeah, I'm not surprised. And I'm sure you weren't surprised, right? This is a very typical thing where someone says, you're not really one of us. You don't really belong. You're not really here. And I think if you are biracial or mixed race, you get it a lot from both sides sometimes. But I look back now and think I now understand better what Jesse Jackson was saying, right? I think he was trying to tell me that being of Caribbean parents, it was a different experience than being from parents who were American Black, descended from slaves, not in the Caribbean as my mother was, but from in America, because it's just a little different. Now, does it matter in terms of journalism and telling stories? I don't think so, but I understand better all these years later what he was talking about. I think he was wrong in terms of, I think good journalists can do anything. I think you just have to listen and hold yourself accountable and make sure you're talking to a lot of people and trying to do good work. But I understand better what he was saying. What he had said to me was like, you don't count, like you're not an American, you're not a descendant of an American slave. And at the time I was like, what is even
Right.
a weird thing to say? Also, why are you grabbing my hand? Like, why are you pinching my skin? But I have learned a lot, actually. I wouldn't say I was wrong. I wouldn't say he was wrong. I think he probably understands my point of view better, which is this is a good story, a worthwhile story to tell that anybody who's willing to listen can tell. And I think I understand that the experience of Black people whose parents were slaves in America is a different story than Black people whose
Sure.
parents were slaves or great, forefathers were slaves in another country. Not better or worse, just different. So I think there's some, I think I understand it better today.